in here in the film cassette well we have the other two screws. Just got interrupted there because I think I hit the file size limit. That only happens if I've been working continuously for far too many minutes. Normally of course there's a natural break fairly promptly at short intervals because I can't find something I want to use. So here's our struts. That's very wobbly. That's a paper shim there. Now if that's present, that goes between the wall of the chamber here and this bracket. It's not always going to be present in cameras, but if you see it, that's what it is. I'm just looking at the state of these. Now, there's a lot of rattle here. This slot is effectively wider than it should be. It'll be wider mostly further down, more than the ends. But you can deal with that. Basically, it's stretched. And what I normally do is just put this piece in the vise, squeeze it up very gently until such stage that the rivet runs down there fairly smoothly. These struts are damaged. The inside struts here should be straight. That should be nice and flat across here. See, that's got a bit of a bow to the inside and the centre. Not so bad there. And the outer struts should be slightly cupped. They should be higher at the ends than they are in the middle. And that means that when this is in the body, it provides some tension to pop these two pins out into position so that they lock correctly. When that's held in there, that's not too bad. The only movement I can see, there's certainly damage. These struts have been badly damaged in the past and repaired. I can tell by all the munch marks someone's been in there with pairs of pliers and doing terrible things. I'll try and improve that a bit. It's certainly got a bit of a wiggle on it. But there's movement here, I think, at that rivet. It may be that the rivet is not staked well into that shaft, into that lever. I'm just watching that to see if I can pick where the movement is. There's an element of that, and the rest of it is just in the slot being somewhat stretched. Alright, so those struts will need to be cleaned. I'll do those in the ultrasonic cleaner. And then I'm going to have to see what I can do about straightening things up so that they work correctly. It's fairly futile trying to work on them while they're all covered in filth and dirt, because that just makes life a bit awkward. And the body, you can see the body is pretty dirty. When was this camera made? Mid-30s? So yeah, it's a bit old. Yeah, about 85 years old, I suppose it makes that, doesn't it? So it's no wonder it's a bit tired. I'll give that a good clean out. And the bellows, of course, I want to look at the state of those bellows. See if there's any suspect areas. I can see a tiny mark there which may amount to a pinhole, or it may just be a sort of a delamination of the leather. This piece here, that was the piece I was most concerned with. And certainly I want to put a patch on there. And I'll put a patch on the inside. Oh, there's damage to the leather at that point too. I'll check that with a torch, flashlight for you Americans. See if there's any sign of a light leak, and I'll patch that as well. I don't want to replace the bellows unless I absolutely have to, because of course I haven't really got any good 85-year-old bellows. But I think I can patch those successfully. But first, pieces away to the ultrasonic cleaner. These will get 10 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner in solvent, a grease and wax remover, and then after that they'll go into the ultrasonic cleaner in a domestic detergent solution. That's one of those nice thick white household detergents that got a bit of ammonia in it and promises to do wonderful things. But it's good. It's good as the second clean, and then after that they're just rinsed very thoroughly in hot water and dried with a hairdryer. Do that when your wife's not at home. Back shortly. So the number one problem with this particular camera that I can see are the light leaks. And the light leaks are in the bellows, and there are pinholes and cuts in the bellows. So what am I going to do about it? Well, I've just unfolded the front pleats here and removed the plate that screws to the back of the front standard just for better access. Now there's a whole series of holes here. Some I'd identified prior to using a torch to see if there was, well, there's one here, a split there. I think I'd identified one there. There's a split there, that's worn through there. At the base, this was a surprise, there's a cut here at that point. There's damage there, and there's certainly a hole there. On the side here, there's a split at this point, like a cut in the leather. Now all of those points let through light. While I was inspecting the bellows, this thing fell off. This is a patch that someone has put on previously. Now, I don't even know where that came from. There's no sign of it having been glued on the inside. I think it was simply sitting on the top, something like that, and had been clamped in place. But so certainly someone has had a go at these bellows in the past to remedy the faults. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to put multiple patches on here. I'll keep them as small as I reasonably can because I don't want to have to overlap patches, and I'm going to have some patches right on the corners. So in this case I'll make a patch that runs through here. I've got to make a patch that will cover that corner. Certainly I want a patch at that corner. I think that just about covers me, because some of those cover multiple pinholes. And what am I going to use? Well, I've got this stuff here. This is rubberized silk. It's the sort of stuff that was used for making shutter curtains and focal plane shuttered cameras. This is tough. It's absolutely light proof. But most importantly, it's very, very flexible and thin. So I'm not going to patch the bellows on the outside because that would be obvious and it would look quite ugly. But I've used this in the past for patching bellows on the inside. The inside of the bellows, a cloth. There's a black cloth used on the inside, and I will simply use that. So I'll use that and I'll cut my patches, glue them, and I'll use contact cement. I'll use the same cement I use for doing everything else, but I'll use it as a contact cement. I will apply a layer of adhesive to the inside of the bellows at that point, the size of my patch. I'll apply a layer of adhesive to the patch, and when they are nice and tacky, exactly as they should be, I will put the patch in place and squeeze it all tight, and that will stay there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rescue these bellows. They've got more holes than any bellows I've tried to fix in the past, but it's just a matter of the number of holes really. None of the patches look impossible to make, and I expect it should go okay. One of the things I'm going to have to do is clean the inside of the bellows. The bellows at the moment have just got, there's a lot of dirt and dust in there. There's sort of green stuff. It looks like the sort of corrosion you get with Zeiss bumps, there's some of that in there. I've got no idea how that came to be there. But I want to get the inside of the bellows, of course I've got to get them clean and grease free if I'm going to get the adhesive to stick. So I'll do that. Most of that unfortunately I'll do off camera, because I'll just bring you snippets of it perhaps, just because it's going to be tedious. First I'll clean the inside of the bellows anyway, and to do that I'm just going to use some naphtha on a cotton bud, and I'm swabbing the inside of the bellows where I'm going to put my first patch to make sure there's no oil or grease, anything that would cause me a problem. Now looking at it here, I can see 3 holes. Oh, one of them is actually a hole that's meant to be there, that's okay. I can see 2 other holes. There's one on the corner right here and a split down there. So I will make my patch cover those 2 holes. Now how did all these get in here, these holes? Well, a lot of them look like cuts. So what's happened is most likely that the bellows have been, the struts have been damaged. They've been ruined by someone folding the camera up the wrong way or doing something they shouldn't have done. And that's damaged the struts, and the struts are typically, what happens is they get pressed in, and then as the camera gets folded up, the bellows get trapped in the mechanism here and just get cut through. I think that's what's happened. So the damage to those struts, obviously there was historic damage there that somebody's had a go at before. I've got a fair idea someone's had a go at it before, because of course the hinge pin at the top of this door had been dealt to in some weird way, and almost certainly that was probably part of the same incident, I would think. So what happened to the camera? Well, what happens to cameras like this is that they get dropped, they get sat on, some clown gets hold of them and doesn't know how to fold up the bellows, so they just press on the front and hope that's going to do the job, and the struts get damaged. That's most likely its history. We'll never know the details, because whoever did that has probably long since started pushing up daisies. Anyway, I'll clean this leather out a little bit better, these bellows, cut a patch, glue it, get everything back. Well, I've marked the area inside the bellows here that I need to put my glue in. So I'll put a layer of glue on there. I'll put a layer of glue on my patch, and I'll put it on the cloth side, not the rubberized side. And when they are sufficiently dried out and tacky, I will put that in place. So I'm not just going to start squirting glue in there, I'm going to apply it with a toothpick, because it's going to be a bit awkward getting this in place anyway. So I need to stretch out these bellows and get a layer of adhesive on there. The outer part's easy to get at. The further I get in, the harder it is to actually get that adhesive rubbed into the surface. And I need to get it rubbed into that surface so I can be sure that it's actually going to bond well. That it's not just sitting on the top on a layer of dust or something. And of course I've got to go around the corner a bit here too, so that is also a complication. I think that's fine. Of course, being contact adhesive, I've got to be careful that the bellows don't fold up and glue to themselves, because otherwise that'll cause me a nuisance as well. So I've got to make sure I've got adhesive just where I want it and nowhere else. The patch is slightly larger than I'd originally intended to make it, only by a few millimetres, because I discovered there was another tiny pinhole also formed part of the same mess. Okay, let's do my patch now. This is of course nice and flat, so it's easier to spread the adhesive on. So I'm following the same technique. I'm making sure that that adhesive is well rubbed into that surface, that there's a good contact there and that layer is even. Doesn't need to be a thick layer, but it does need to be even. It needs to cover everything. That I think should do, so I'll just leave that there and let this cure for 5 minutes or so. And with the contact adhesives, typically what you do is you apply them to both surfaces, you leave it for the prescribed number of minutes, which always changes depending on temperature and humidity, until both surfaces are lightly tacky to the touch typically. And then you apply the patch or apply two surfaces together and press them firmly into place, and then the bond becomes permanent. That's typically how contact adhesives work, and hopefully this will all go smoothly. This patch is probably the largest patch I'm putting in here. The other patches should all be smaller. The only tricky part with patches is when you've got to get them in around corners, because you've got complex folds with the corners of bellows, and the patch, whatever you're using for a patch material, there has to be able to follow those complex folds. It won't be a problem with this particular material because it is so flexible. But if you were using something that was too stiff, you would end up with bellows that don't fold nicely. And recently I had a camera and there was a previous repair to bellows had been made, and they'd used some very unusual adhesive, something that was very thick and hard and crusty, and obviously it just didn't fold. So there was like a big lump in the bellows because it didn't fold at the pleats because the adhesive wouldn't move. Anyway, I'll let this lot cure. I'm probably only a minute or two away from that point now, and then I will get that patch into place. I probably won't talk you through that process because it might involve a fair bit of swearing. Well, I've got my bellows in some sort of useful state now. I think I've got 4 patches in there, and I'm not seeing light coming through anywhere at all. So they appear to be quite good. But I've got to deal with these struts, because these struts are pretty ugly, and they've got bends in all sorts of odd places they shouldn't have bends. There's sort of zigzags where there are bends going one way and then bends going the other. So I'm going to have to spend quite a bit of time trying to straighten these up to get this mechanism to work true. So basically it just involves using pliers to hold things and bending it in the appropriate places. Some of this is just done with your fingers, just making sure that you're bending it at the right spot. It would be nice if you could dismantle this completely. If you could dismantle it completely, if these were screws instead of rivets, I'd dismantle it completely. Each of those pieces of metal in there, you could straighten them up, get them nice and straight, get them running looking as you'd like them, and put them back together. But unfortunately, everything's riveted together, and I've got to try and fight with this stuff in place. And some of these pieces have got twists in them. It'll be fun.